Hey everybody, it's your boy, and apologies if I look pretty rough and unkempt. That's because I've been having a lazy day, and then all of a sudden this massive news story just broke and I really need to cover it and get it out as fast as possible. So apologies if I don't look as good as I usually do, for my standards at least. Anyway, the big news that has happened is that an MP in the UK has been stabbed to death in his local constituency. His name was Sir David Amess of Southend West, and he was doing what they call a surgery, an MP's surgery, where people will go and meet him and discuss issues of the day, local problems and issues and things that they want addressed. It's just a fun gathering, essentially. Usually it's done in churches and other outdoor venues and indoor venues, and this is really common. It's normal in this country for MPs to meet their communities in these events. He was stabbed by a man multiple times during this event, was rushed to hospital, but unfortunately died. This comes off the back of two other assaults that happened to two bigger MPs. Jacob Rees-Mogg was harassed in the streets by a disability campaigner, although that's normal, people get harassed all the time by people who are campaigning. Just look at Insulate Britain, for example. As far as I'm aware, Jacob Rees-Mogg wasn't injured by this person. I might be wrong on that, people can correct me. But another person who is as famous as him, Ian Duncan Smith, was attacked by a group of 5 people. Although admittedly he was only really attacked with a traffic cone, nonetheless he was still assaulted by 5 people. It's not a coincidence that these attacks and this death happened as a result of the Labour conference, because certain members of the Labour Party and their apparatchiks were, let's just say, a bit fiery in their rhetoric. Most famously, Angela Rayner spent a lot of her speech dehumanising Tories, most famously using the phrase Tory scum, which is a phrase that if you're British, you will have heard countless, hundreds, thousands, millions of times from people. It's one thing for a supporter or an apparatchik to say such things, because these people tend not to have the influence of a Member of Parliament. But for a Member of Parliament to openly say such things, to engage in dehumanisation of the opposition, well, that's different, isn't it? And Angela Rayner engaged in this. And in fact, hours before, when David Amess's assault was reported initially, she had this to say on Twitter. "I'm horrified by the reports regarding David Amess and an incident at his constituency surgery today. We don't know the details yet, but on behalf of all of us in the Labour Party, I want to say all of our thoughts are with David, and we all hope that he pulls through and is okay." Lies, lies, lies. You couldn't give a shit what happens to David Amess or to any other Tory MP, or to be quite frank, anybody who doesn't think like you. That's why you engaged in that dehumanisation in the conference in the first place. You were playing up to your supporter base, the ones that you still have left anyway, because you know, as well as I do, as somebody who grew up in a Labour household, that these people have been brought up for generations, and especially in recent years, to hate and to view Tory supporters or anybody who's just remotely right-wing. They don't even need to be a member of the Tory party. They will be brought up to hate these people and view them as subhuman. They do. They don't view them as human. They view them as evil, vile antichrists almost. It's almost a religious hatred of these people. You know as well as I do that that is the case in millions of households across this country. It's not so much the case on the Tory side, where this dehumanisation, as far as I'm aware, doesn't usually happen in families. It's really individuals who, for whatever reason, they go through a particular rabbit hole online and end up radicalised. And I guess because of that radicalisation, they think, well, if they hate me and don't view me as human, I should do the same thing. That's probably why politicians like Jo Cox was murdered way back when in 2010 or 2011. She knows that this happens, and she was playing on that. She was using that to galvanise her support, to make her look like a proper Labour MP, as somebody who they can vote for, somebody who they know is ideologically on the same track. And lo and behold, literally a week or two after, we have 2 MPs attacked. Or at least one of them was harassed, one of them physically attacked, and one has now been murdered. The fact that this didn't happen earlier is actually a miracle. Sure, a lot of these people will privately or publicly view Tories and right-wingers as less than scum, but nonetheless, they wouldn't act on that because, well, they'll still be put in prison and jail for it. It's kind of like a high-functioning psychopath, if you think about it. They wouldn't mind killing people, but the law prevents them. This is essentially how these people operate. And remember that these people were taught from their parents, who consequently were taught by their parents, and so on and so forth, in order to hate a large section of the population who doesn't even hate them in the same way. Nothing is going to happen as a result of this. Angela Rayner is not going to suffer any consequences as a result of what she said. Even if we could make some kind of link to her dehumanising Tory supporters and right-wingers to this murder. Even if the murderer says, I heard that speech and was finally moved into action. It's just, not going to happen. And Angela Rayner doesn't care about him. She doesn't care about the person stabbing him even. She probably thinks that's one less Tory MP to deal with, because this guy was an MP for a very long time. 39 years, in fact. And what's interesting is he wasn't even an MP that ever held a ministerial position or even a shadow ministerial position. He was never on the front benches. He was always in the back benches. He just focused entirely on his own community for the most part and voted in Parliament when he was called on to do so. But remember, his murder will be justified by certain Labour activists and communists because of the government policies that killed thousands of people. The mythical 100,000 people killed by Tory policies pre-COVID, where actually, their policies did kill hundreds of thousands of people, but not the policies that they agree with, obviously, like the lockdowns. No. That stuff didn't kill anyone. It was the budget cuts and things like that, and not maybe they died of other reasons. Nothing to do with the government. We have people on Twitter even saying that this guy deserved it because he may have voted against free school meals, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a free lunch, to quote Milton Friedman, anyway. And the thing is, these people also, funnily enough, must support parents not willing to buy food for their kids. They'd rather waste it on other stuff. And the thing is, this dehumanisation is only going to get worse. It has been getting worse since 2010, when Gordon Brown lost the election to David Cameron and the Tories, who then went into coalition with the Lib Dems. That was then the start of it going into a fever pitch, and it was only helped by the death of Joe Cox, Brexit, and Angela Rayner also doing what she's doing, and Corbyn. Events have been used to push this dehumanisation, and it's only going to get worse. Unless we find a way to break this brainwashing habit that many of these people have, if we find a way to reconnect people in this country, then I hate to say it, but there's going to be more murders like this. Even though they have been, luckily, few and far between, they're going to happen more and more. And eventually, a lot of right-wingers are going to get fed up of this, having been victims for far too long and being dehumanised for far too long, and will start doing it to the Labour supporters, because if they do it to us, why can't we do it to them? That kind of mindset. But then again, that's probably what Labour wants. They maybe want people divided and hating each other so that they can drum up support. Maybe they can use that to manipulate people into voting for them, because they do have a much better propaganda wing than the Tories do. The Tories are only winning because normal people, funnily enough, recognise that Labour are terrible. But if Labour can find the right leader, find the right set of policies that they can lie about and pretend that they're not as woke as they claim to be, not as cultural Marxist as they claim to be, that they actually like white people and the white working class, but then maybe, just maybe, they could take advantage of all this that's going on. But luckily they can't right now, because they have no talent. They don't have a Blair anymore, who can pretend to be for the working man, who can pretend to be for this, that and the other, but then behind everything pushing different policies than what he promised. I'm not being blackpilled when I say all the things that I said about how it's going to get worse unless we don't address it. I'm just being realistic, because I do believe that it can be addressed. We've seen it before in places where there's been whole genocides, and yet eventually things seem to calm down, people seem to rebuild these bridges slowly but surely, tentatively. Again, it will never be the same as it was before the shit went down, but they still are rebuilding. And if that can happen in some of the worst places on earth, then maybe it can happen here, where it's not actually that bad yet. So anyway, until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.